stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome everyone. We'll do the roll call to begin with. Stan?
Bell Harbor Homeowners Association. Bermuda Riviera Association. Beverly Heights Neighborhood Association. Birch Park Homeowners Association. Central Beach Alliance.
Here.
Coley Hammock.
Here.
One second, I missed somebody.
Gonna have to stay here. Central City.
Central City Alliance.
Here.
Still have two.
Coley Hammock was here, right?
Yes.
Coral Ridge.
Here.
Country Club.
Oh, not Country Club.
Country. Coral Ridge Association.
Here.
Coral Ridge Isles Homeowner Association.
Here.
Crescent Park Civic Association. Downtown Civic Association here. Edgewood Civic Association. Flagler Village Civic Association.
Here.
Gulf Mile Community Association. Harbordale Civic Association.
Here.
Harbor Beach Property Owners. Harbor Inlet Association.
Here.
Historic Dorsey Riverbend.
Here.
Home Beautiful Park Civic Association.
Here.
Idlewild Improvement Association.
Here.
Imperial Point Association.
Here.
Lake Ridge Civic Association.
Here.
Landings Residential Association. Lauderdale Beach Homeowners Association.
Here.
Lauderdale Harbors Improvement Association.
Oh, here.
Lauderdale Isles Civic Association. Lauderdale Manors Homeowner Association. Melrose Manors Homeowner Association.
Here.
Nurmi Isles Homeowner Association.
Middle River is here.
Oh, it's screwed up on this sheet, sorry. Thank you. Nurmi Isles Homeowner Association.
Thank you.
Poinsettia Heights Civic Association.
Here.
Poinciana Park Civic Association. Progresso Village.
Here.
Rio Vista Civic Association.
Yes.
River Garden Sweeting Estate. Riverland Preservation Society. River Oaks Civic Association.
Here.
Riverside Park Residents Association. Rock Island Community.
Here.
Sail Bend Civic Association. Sail Bend. Seven Isles Civic Association. Shady Bank Civic Association.
Here.
Sunrise Intercoastal.
Present.
South Middle River Civic Association. Tarpon River Civic Association.
Here.
Victoria Park Civic Association.
Here.
Let me just go back and confirm one more. Central Beach Alliance is not here, right?
Here.
Here? Okay, I'm sorry, I had a mistake on that. We'd also ask, at the end of the meeting, if Home Beautiful's representative if you would just catch one of us up here on it for contact information, we could try to reach out. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you, Stan. And we have a quorum. So I didn't introduce myself. I'm Colleen Lockwood, the president of the Council of Fort Lauderdale Civic Associations. I and our board of directors welcome the general membership here tonight, so thank you all for being here. One announcement before we kick off the rest of the meeting. Our holiday party may not be globally known, but it's very popular locally, and I would say world-class cuisine. So, December 10th, bring a dish, outdo your neighbor, and you can bring anything you want. We have Commissioner Sorensen confirmed, and we'll get to the rest of the agenda, but it's a hugely popular holiday party every year, and you're welcome to wear your festive sweaters and at all, okay? And because you only turn 90 once, and it should at least be a month-long celebration. Betty, would you come up? We have your framed photo up here, and I just want to make sure you get this from us, right? It's all wrapped up, but this was the photograph of Betty that everybody signed around the edges, so we don't have to sing again this month, but yeah, we love you and thank you.
Oh, okay.
We're going to show it right.
Oh, my God. This was the one that hung, this is the one that hung in City Hall.
Right. Citizen.
It's great. And the one that, everybody that comes in my house, I haven't decided where to put yet, the one that, the big one, you know, with the opens up that says...
Oh, the card.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the big card with all the signatures on it. But it's so beautiful, you know, everybody comes in my house and they want to open it up and look at it. So, it's great.
That's cool.
Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Wonderful people, and keep doing what you're doing. It's funny to me walk in because I'm so used to doing things. You know? I feel
We got a
funny.
job for you. Wait, we got you coming back, for sure.
I feel funny walking in and not getting the food out of it. And all that. But thank you, this is beautiful. Thank you so much.
We'll wrap it up for you on the way out. All right, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Betty.
Thank you.
All right, can I have a motion for reviewing and acceptance of the minutes of October 10th? So moved. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, pass. Treasurer's report.
Okay, at this particular point, we have $6,291.27, plus our $5,000 in the money market.
All right. Did we vote on our treasurer's report? No. All right, cool. All right. I don't see a rep from Fort Lauderdale Police. Is anyone here from FLPD? Okay, so we'll skip the police report. Hopefully the crime has not gone way up this month. We'll hear next month. All right, so we're going to go straight to the introduction of guests. The printed agenda you have is missing the second presenter, but we have two beautiful people from historical legacy institutions in our community. Patricia Zeiler is going to go next, but I'd like to introduce, to kick us off, the CEO of Bonnet House. Patrick Shablaski is the CEO, and he is responsible for ensuring the preservation of the historic site, strategic planning, ensuring that museum programs support the organization's mission, promoting good board governance, and managing the annual budget. Prior to becoming CEO, he's Director of Development for several years, 20 years of arts administration. He is an Indiana native. It's always a good thing, and a graduate of Indiana University School of Law and Indiana State University. He's a member of both Indiana and Florida bars. He's a member of the board for directors of John Knox Village, and also serves as a liaison to the John Knox Village of Florida Foundation Board, member of the Fort Lauderdale Greater Chamber of Commerce, Beach Council, and the City of Fort Lauderdale 2019 Walk of Fame Committee. If I could ask you to introduce your guest who's here with you tonight before you present, and then we'll have everyone welcome you officially.
Absolutely. I have with me Maxine Streeter this evening, who is an attorney with Genevieve's Job, Love, and Batista. She is
representing Bonnet House in the Master of the Florida Trust. So if you have any questions, I am happy to answer any of those questions.
Okay, with that, would you please help me welcome Patrick?
thank you. Good evening. It's a pleasure for me to be here this evening, and I'm happy to share a little bit of news about Bonnet House. I'm curious, how many people in this room have been to Bonnet House? Wonderful. Fantastic. You would be surprised how many times I speak to groups of people like this, and I ask that question, and I just see a handful of hands. But all of you are engaged in your community and civically minded, so it makes sense that you would come to Bonnet House, and I want to thank you for doing that. I wanted to say just a little bit about the history of Bonnet House, just to remind you of that, tell you a little bit about what we do today, and give you some news about our 100th anniversary. Bonnet House turns 100 in 2020. And for Fort Lauderdale, 100 years is really a pretty remarkable milestone. So we're going to be celebrating that throughout the year, and I'll say a little bit more about that. But first, just a few words about the history of Bonnet House. It all started in 1893 when Hugh Taylor Birch, for whom Hugh Taylor Birch State Park is named, decided that he wanted to get away from the World's Fair in Chicago. There were all kinds of people coming to the city. When someone said that they wanted to rent his barn so that they could sleep overnight to go to the fair, he decided, there's way too many people in the city, I have to get out. He heard about development possibilities in Florida. So he took the train to Titusville. That's as far as the railroad went in those days. He borrowed a boat from Henry Flagler, who he knew through Standard Oil, and started sailing down the coast. Ran into a storm, had to take refuge in what is today Port Everglades. It was Lake Mabel at the time. He loved it. He fell in love with the area. Not one person living on the barrier island. But Birch loved the solitude, and he came back over the next few years. He ended up buying about 3 miles of the coastline, paid about $30 an acre for it. No one wanted to live on the barrier island in those days. So a very different Fort Lauderdale than what the city has become and grown into today. Now, the World's Fair had a very different impact on another Chicagoan. His name was Frederick Clay Bartlett. He was from a family that owned the largest wholesaler of hardware in the United States. Today, that company is True Value Hardware. And there was every expectation that Frederick would go into the family hardware business. But he went to the World's Fair, and instead of being repelled by it, he fell in love with the art that was on display there, and decided that he wanted to be an artist. So his family was agreeable. Should he get into a good art school? He did. He went to the Royal Academy in Munich. Came back to the United States in the late 1890s, made $65,000 his first year as an artist, which was a huge amount of money at that time. I think there are a lot of artists that would like to make $65,000 a year now. But he was a collector as well as an artist. We'll talk a little bit about that. He was married 3 times. His first wife, Dora Tripp, was a fellow art student at the Royal Academy. She passed away. He then married Helen Burke, who was Hugh Taylor Birch's daughter, and as a result of that marriage, in 1919, Birch gave them 35 acres of his property here in Florida so that they could build a winter home. So they were only married for 6 years. She died from cancer, and then Frederick finally married Evelyn Fortune Lilly. Now, she had been married to Eli Lilly of Lilly Pharmaceutical fame. It had not been a happy marriage. It ended in divorce. But with Frederick, she found the true love of her life, and her artistic instincts came out. We'll talk about a little bit about that too. So Frederick, as I said, was an artist. He did a lot of decorative work in Chicago. This is some of the examples of that work that still exists in Chicago to this day. He was also, though, a painter, and so these are some examples of his artwork. And this Chinese temple piece up here actually was on the cover of the Literary Digest magazine. It became Reader's Digest. I'm sure you've heard of that magazine. But he was a very well-respected artist at the turn of the last century and into the early 20th century. He was also a collector. I'm sure you recognize some of these paintings, particularly the Grand Jatte there up in the upper left-hand corner. It was the centerpiece of the Art Institute of Chicago. They collected all of these paintings and gave them to the Art Institute. Now, Evelyn turned out to be an artist as well. Frankly, her marriage with Eli Lilly was not a very happy one. His idea of a fun night was sitting on the porch reading the newspaper. So he really didn't do a lot to nurture her natural talent, but she really had no training. The paintings that you see here are the result of her natural ability. So she was a very talented woman and painted for about 6 years in the 1930s after marrying Frederick. So a little bit about Bonnet House itself. It's Frederick's interpretation of Caribbean-style architecture. He wanted to do something very different from what Meisner was doing up in Palm Beach. You know from being at Bonnet House, it is not the showpiece of the rich and famous. It has furnishings and artwork that the owners really loved. Construction started in 1920, so that's why we are celebrating our 100th anniversary coming up next year. Here are some photographs from that time. You can see that the blocks of Bonnet House were made on site. Bonnet House is vernacular in its architecture, which just means that it makes use of local building materials, and that can be found throughout the site, from the Dade County pine to the beach sand and brackish water that was used to make the concrete blocks that make up Bonnet House. So I just have some pictures of what Bonnet House was like in those early days. You can see that the barrier island was very much a coastal scrub habitat in those days. And here's some pictures of the courtyard from the 1920s. Very different in Helen's time. Very plain. The Renaissance that we know today really came from Evelyn later on. And even in the drawing room here, you can see, you know, the plain, unpainted concrete walls, very much built as an artist's retreat. It wasn't a place for lavish entertainment. Some more pictures from the 1920s. But it was really with Evelyn's marriage to Frederick that things changed at Bonnet House. So you can see the drawing room here with all of the decorative painting. It changed. And there was a real symbiotic relationship between Frederick and Evelyn. The dining room, compared to what it was, tiles put on the wall, just a much more festive place, if you will. A room a lot of people haven't seen, the master bedroom upstairs. You can see the bed there that was Frederick and Evelyn's bed. Interesting thing about that bed, and it shows you how they did their own thing. That bed was originally your typical dark, somber Victorian furniture. Now, you would never do that to antiques today. Frederick didn't like it, he just painted it white. So, and that happened a lot at Bonnet House, by the way. Evelyn collected a lot of little doodads. She would go up to Palm Beach to the Kampong shop. These are some of the collection items that are around the courtyard today. So one thing that's very special about Bonnet House, a lot of historic sites have had to be recreated. If the Bartletts came back and went into Bonnet House, all of their original furnishings are there. So we like to say that we can present our guests a very authentic experience. This is a picture of Mrs. Bartlett. It was taken at the time of her 100th birthday. She said that she didn't want the property to change, and we have been able to fulfill that wish. So a little bit about Bonnet House today. Holiday Magic is in its 3rd year. That's coming up. We'll be opening on December 6th. We've already sold out the VIP, 100 tickets for that part of the event, but there are still tickets available for the Holiday Magic Soiree on December the 6th. So please consider coming to that. We have Concerts Under the Stars, music series concerts that take place in the winter months. Our Orchid Festival is the first weekend of December, or I'm sorry, it used to be. It is now the first weekend of April coming up. We'll have international vendors again this year for the 2nd time. We get about 11,000 school children every year coming to Bonnet House. We have a lecture series. We rent the property for weddings and special events. If you have a wedding coming up, give us a call. We'd love to make your special day more special. And again, our centennial next year, 2020, April 25th will be the Centennial Soiree. We kicked off that campaign today. We're asking or hoping that 100 people in the community, at least 100 people, will give $1,000 to commemorate our 100th anniversary. We're $57,000 on the way there already, so we've had some very good success with that. That's Bonnet House as it is today. So a lot of change from Hugh Taylor Birch's time when he came down with just one person living on the barrier island. I invite you to become a member. You can do that on our website We have lots of volunteer opportunities. We rely on our volunteers. Bobby Pearson, John Holmes, I saw come in the room. Thank you for your work as volunteers at Bonnet House. And by all means, go to our website, bonnethouse.org, to learn more about the organization. So that concludes my presentation, but I wanted to leave some time for questions if anyone had any. Yes, sir.
How are you doing with the separation from the Florida Trust?
The question was, how are we doing with the separation from the Florida Trust? I want to give just a little bit of background. The Florida Trust is a 501c3 organization out of Tallahassee. They're not a state agency. Mrs. Bartlett gave the property to them in 1983. Things started to go south in that relationship pretty soon thereafter. We have been in negotiations with them and the National Trust since February. Really, mediation, though, started in earnest in September. It's fair to say that I think we have made good progress on that, and I think the end result, hopefully, will be what we've hoped for and will really put Bonnet House on the level it needs to be for its next 100 years. So we're making good progress on that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Our goal is to keep control of Bonnet House local. We have a local board of directors, 21 people on that board of directors, about a $2.1 million budget every year. So our goal is to keep control of the property local. Yes, sir.
In your comments about people wanting to build on the property and build a restaurant, can you talk a little bit about that?
I'd be happy to. We explored probably about 5 to 7 years ago now. When Mrs. Bartlett left the property, she divided the property into 3 parcels. The residence parcel where the house is, where very little can be done. There's also another parcel where a restaurant could be built. She specifically said that. She also said that development was possible on a 3rd parcel. The revenue from that would be used solely to support Bonnet House if reasonable means for support of the property had been exhausted. The National Trust for Historic Preservation has to vote to allow that. So, no, we just can't come in and build. The National Trust has to agree that reasonable means have been exhausted. Frankly, one of the reasons that we even explored developing the property is because about $150,000 a year was leaving Bonnet House and going to the Florida Trust. So, as stewards of the property here locally, we explored what the options could be. We decided not to go forward with the restaurant. Any development on the other parcel is very impractical. It's unlikely that that could really happen. So there are no plans for development, and our position is that if what we earn can stay with Bonnet House, reasonable means haven't been exhausted. $150,000 is a lot of money that goes to the Florida Trust, and frankly, we get nothing in return for it. So if that stays with us, that will make a big difference for us. Anything else?
I want to ask a silly question. Are there still monkeys?
I knew you.
There used to be the monkey bar there.
Yes, there are.
We have 2. We have 2 monkeys left on the property. 2.
Boys.
2 males.
Gotta go find a female.
Is there anything else that you've done to connect Bonnet House with the south side of the beach? I know you opened the gate.
Yes.
But I'm not even sure if that's still open.
We open it on demand. We put our number up there during the summer months. It now is open during this time of year. That's open when the property is open. So it's open, but it's not a pass-through so that people can get to Publix, even on their bicycle. They can if they, walk it and they pay an admission fee. But there is the south gate that's open, and we have had some preliminary discussions with the city about maybe putting a greenway. That's dependent upon funding and where it would go and mangrove mediation. It would have very low impact on that, frankly. So we've had some discussions. We think that that would open up Bonnet House in a very good way to the community and make it more accessible. So we've had some discussions, but nothing really concrete has happened on that yet.
One last question?
Yes, Barbie?
It's not a question, I just wanted to say, I volunteer at the Bonnet House, and they have a great group that works together, the volunteers and the staff and Patrick, and it's a wonderful place, and they're great to work with, and we gotta say that.
Oh, I got a question.
That's all.
Thank you. Yes,
I'm
John?
going to echo that. I'm a house docent there. I've been there almost 8 years. And I do an average of 1 to 2 tours a week. And we get along excellently with the local staff. I do not know what these people would do from Tallahassee. I have no idea what goes on, in my opinion.
I have a friendly suggestion, maybe just that. Do you reach out to students within the public education system?
Oh, yes. We
Would you
have
like an
about
internship?
internship. We do some internships with Covenant House next door, actually, believe it or not. We have had some relationship there. Really, internships, I mean, we would be open to that possibility with the public schools, be happy to talk about it. Would depend on, you know, what opportunity we could provide and what the fit would be, but I'd be happy to discuss it.
I think that would be a great start, kicking open the doors and appreciating your community, and you know, knowing about knowledge is not knowledge until it is shared, and so, you know, therefore, there it is, you know?
Wonderful suggestion, Board Member Albetta. Thank you very much for coming here tonight. Staff, the docents, I think I've been on one of your tours. It's one of the most beautiful places in our area. Their evening concert series are beautiful, if you're still doing that.
We are.
Weddings, events, it's just a gorgeous place, and the history is amazing. Please help me thank Patrick and Michelle for being here tonight. Maxine. Judge Maxine is what I should call you. Okay, great. So our next presenter is from History Fort Lauderdale. If you don't know Pat Zeiler, you should. She is a history trove subject matter expert. History Fort Lauderdale operates a campus of 6 historic buildings, 3 museums, and a research library. The museums and collections include more than 400,000 historic photos, 100,000 objects, and they range from a prehistoric Indian arrowhead to a Super Bowl trophy. Historic maps, sets of architectural blueprints, oral histories, and 3,000 rare books. It was incorporated in 1962 and is one of Broward County's oldest charities. Now, Pat doesn't talk a lot about herself in her bio, but I know her very well in the community. She formerly headed up Sun Trolley, for those of you familiar, and we're blessed to have in our community. Pat, come on up and talk us about some recent initiatives with your organization.
Hi, you should have a flyer, everybody, about the downtown marketplace. I'm going to be very quick. So this is right here in the City Hall parking garage, the 4th Saturday of every month, and we've been working with Riverwalk and some other partners, and they thought we should come and talk to you and offer you space at a very minimal cost on a monthly basis. For anyone in your homeowners association stuff, I want to do a garage sale, they wouldn't have to do the permitting stuff. That's right here. The nice thing about having it in this parking garage, it's obviously covered, there's not weather issues, it's very comfortable, it's very lit, so it's every 4th Saturday. There's a phone number there to contact someone if there's anyone in your homeowners association that's interested, and we'd be happy to welcome you anytime. We have about, I think last month we had 60 vendors.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of a large group.
It's jumping.
Yeah,
It's jumping.
well, we're trying. So if you have questions, I know this is one of our loaned execs that's managing this, the phone number, but you can check our website, historyfortlauderdale.org, for the actual office number and get me anytime you need me, because I'll segue that to my next, just really quick. Colleen said to mention, Historical Studies does some consulting work for the city on historic preservation, and last year we began working on the history of the neighborhoods. It's a lot harder than it sounds. So the only one we have completely finished with the help of the Homeowners Association is Victoria Park. I've talked to a few other representatives. I don't see anybody I recognize this evening, but There could be somebody here we've talked with before. So if you have materials in your collection from your secretary or anyone like that that may assist us in going, telling the story of your neighborhood, I would love to speak with you. So again, it's historyfortlauderdale.org. I'm happy to share the one that we wrote for Victoria Park. We've taken it all the way back to the Diston land purchase. I'm going to get this date wrong because I haven't looked at it for a while. I think it's like 1872. Diston bought 4 million acres of Florida. Because Florida was like not in great shape after the Civil War and had lots of debts. So a lot of that was Broward County. So that's kind of where we're taking it back to. So sort of a really in-depth title search all the way back to the very beginnings of your neighborhood. So love to talk to you about that. You can find my phone number and my contact information on the website, and we'll chat sometime when you have a Is that good?
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So another wonderful community partner. And just really quick, you have other flyers in front of you. The Stand Up, Speak Out, and the Storybook Festival. Nicholas is here from the Broward County Public Library. He's not on the agenda, but I promised him 30 seconds to tell us about, because it's related to history. He's going to kick it off.
Hello, everyone. I'm representing Jill Steers, who is our regional library manager. She should be the manager at the Imperial Point, by the way. And we actually are the home of the archive for Broward County. It used to be, at one time it was in the garage, and then it went over to a building over in Sailboat Bend, and now it's at the main library. So it's a great little treasure trove of historical things. The Stand Up, Speak Out is kind of two programs coming up. November 23rd with the League of Women Voters. Next year is the 100th anniversary, another one, of the right to vote for women nationally. And then they're going to be talking about Dan Rather's book about what unites us on December 7th. We have a few of the system-wide brochures I put out, but I also have my card, or if you need any extras of these, I can share with you, because we're always here to help, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about the public library at your convenience. So, did I make 30 seconds?
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, so last set of presentations tonight about the Parks bond. A lot of questions have come up, arisen about this $200 million bond that was passed earlier this year. Feels like a long time ago. So we have subject matter experts leading the charge from within the city administration. We have compiled and curated questions from the general membership. And Chris and Phil and Zoe are here to answer those questions. So without further ado, I don't think we need to announce how wonderful these folks are, but we have City Manager Chris Lagerbloom here, Director of Parks, Phil Thornburg, and in the back, in the event that she's needed, is the Chief Education Officer, Zoe Saunders. So with that, I'll kick it over to you guys.
Over to Phil. So
Yep.
everybody said they're going to be brief. I plan on taking hours. For what it's worth. These
We'd love to hear from you.
Great questions. And we're prepared to systematically work through them all tonight. We've prepared for them and have answers that we can speak to tonight, and see what kind of questions arise out of those. I'm going to turn it over to Phil quickly, because he's the Parks Director, and he's sort of living this and breathing this on a daily basis. I'm involved at the level of making sure that we're moving forward quickly and hiring a program manager. As a matter of fact, I can tell you the second round of interviews to make that appointment is tomorrow, so it is clearly ongoing. It's timely. The quicker we get somebody on board to start to get back out into the neighborhoods to do the research, to make sure that the plans that we're operating from are still the plans that exist today, that make sense today, nothing's gone stale. That's as quick as we can start to get some projects built in the community. So I said I was going to turn it over to you. I want to say one more thing. I told you it was going to be hours. One of the other things that's not necessarily related to the current and existing parks that's going on is our work with our real estate group, as well as Colliers, who works on our behalf, to identify parcels around Fort Lauderdale proactively that fit a set of criteria that the City Commission adopted a resolution that said that we should have a park within 10 minutes of every walkable location in Fort Lauderdale. So every residential home should have a park within 10 minutes. So they have sort of put that in a formula and started to look at vacant or desirable parcels in Fort Lauderdale that meet the criteria of closing that gap. And they're actively pursuing those now.
have 8 individual parcels that are in different levels of review, either under contract with a letter of interest or in the appraisal phase. So we're trying to fill those gaps so that we can make good on the commission's desire to have a park within 10 minutes of every house in Fort Lauderdale. So with that, I know you're more interested probably in how you're going to improve the green space and the big, more active recreation or pocket-type parks we have in Fort Lauderdale. So I'll turn it over to Phil and we can start the list. And thank you, Chris. I'm here to jump in if phone a friend, lifeline?
Yeah.
And we didn't say this, but we're not taking questions, open questions from the audience. If you did not have a chance to send in a question ahead of time, we're passing around 3x5 cards. We're going to ask you to write them down and pass them up if your questions are not being addressed. Okay? Thank you.
So let me just expand a little bit on what the city manager just mentioned, and then we can go into specific questions you may have. So on the park side, as Chris mentioned, we are moving forward aggressively to hire our program manager. So as we mentioned to this group, we will hire a firm that will implement the bond on our behalf. So they will start with the outreach to the neighborhoods and deciding what actually needs to be done in the parks around the city. They will also do the conceptuals, the planning, the actual design, and work with our procurement department to bid out the projects. They will provide a project manager to make sure the projects are done correctly, and they will be there when we cut the ribbon. We will have what we're calling a project manager, so this is a program manager. And then we have a project manager that we will be hiring, which will be a staff member that will be overseeing that company. So that'll be their only job on a daily basis, to make sure that they're doing what's in their scope and are doing everything that's asked of them. So that's moving. We're hoping to get them on board soon after the first year, so we can get this ball rolling and get these parks done. So as you know, it's kind of hard to understand yet until we know who they are and we sit down with them how it's going to roll out. But there's going to be some parks that are going to take a lot more time than others. So you know, some of the bigger ones, the Holiday Park, the Carter Park, Mills Pond Park, some of those are going to have bigger capital improvements because of the size and what they have there now. It's going to take a little more time to work through everything that needs to be done there. And then they're going to have, you know, there's going to be a lot of smaller things I think we can do immediately. And the other thing we need to think about is just trying to package as much as we can so we can get the economy of scale. So, for example, if we're going to have 20 playgrounds going in or 20 tennis courts, for example, or lighting, what we don't want to do is just do one, and we'd like to try to package those when we bid them out to try to get a little more bang for our buck. So that's kind of going on the park side. As Chris mentioned, on the property side, we're moving along on those. We are looking at top priorities are one where we have a 10-minute walk issue right now. We are looking at other properties as well. So if you have those, they are on a list. We are working with those and trying to talk to the owners to see if they are interested. If they are, then we get an idea on what they're willing to, what they want, and what the Colliers thinks they're worth. And then on all those properties, then if it looks like it might materialize, then those will be brought forward. So kind of the process will be, it'll come through staff, through the consultant, through staff, through our advisory board, our Parks, Recreation, and Beaches Advisory Board, which is the commission is designated to be kind of the overseer of the bond. And then it'll go through them. If they're comfortable with what we are recommending and the consultant's recommending, then it would go to the city commission for final approval. The other two that are out there, Lockhart Stadium is kind of on its own as far as the development with the soccer team. We are working on the south portion for a public park. They are paying for some, we are paying for some as well. So that's going to be moving forward. As that development, the soccer stadium will be done first, and then they'll start working on the south end for the public park. And then on the tunnel top park, that's kind of an agreement with FDOT since they own the tunnel, that's moving forward as well. There's actually a meeting, I wrote it down, this month at the Stranahan House on the 25th at 5:30. It's a public meeting if anyone's interested in going to that, to kind of get an update on what's going on in tunnel top. And then there'll be some more discussions to the business community and with the commission. And then once the staff gets direction on what the commission wants to do at tunnel top, then we'll, we and the Transportation Mobility Group will be working on that to bring that to fruition as well.
Write it down. Write it down.
You want us to go question by question?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing now.
And
Yeah,
that
that works
seems to-
great.
In summary, that seems
Yeah.
to work.
Yeah.
So let's do that.
Thank you.
And I always like just making sure that we touch on each one, because I think we're going to even say a couple of these, we don't know quite what was asked, and maybe we can clarify.
Thank you.
The first one, the list that was used to support the need for the bond was about 30 pages and described as a living, breathing document by some members of the commission. What's the status of the initial list today? So if I take it back in time, the commission, as they were debating the bond resolution, wanted to provide the public some level of assurance that this wasn't an effort of bait and switch, that this wasn't to give us a bunch of money in the form of Parks bond, and then, oh, by the way, we'll change it on you on the back end. If we told you we'd give you a water feature in Holiday Park, that we'd give you a water feature in Holiday Park, and not decide we weren't going to give you a water feature, we're going to give you a dog park, or something along those lines. So against my better recommendation, which I thought at the time was to keep as much flexibility as possible in the bond dollars, they said, no, we really think it's important that we show what these projects are going to entail. And so when they did adopt a bond resolution, they adopted that list of projects. They adopted it with some flexibility. And I say some flexibility is we can't take an apple and make it an orange, but if all of a sudden somebody wanted a water slide and now they just want a splash pad, we can probably get there. Those kind of decisions as we come back into the community and say, is this still a good document? We are going to be compelled to some degree to deliver upon what was advertised, because that's what we put out there and said, we're going to give you this, and so at some point you're going to expect that we're going to give you this. We did also include in the bond some dollars that were for future projects not yet identified, and there's about $30 million, and it's split up per commission district at $7.5 million a district, to say, there's going to be something that comes up and we didn't know about at the time we originally issued the bond resolution, so we'll have that $7.5 million to use as those needs arise. And then we also did set aside dollars for land acquisition. So those are sort of the components of the bond itself. So is it a living document, and is it flexible? To some degree. It doesn't share the flexibility that not having it would allow us to be in right now, where we could sort of just create the list as we went out and started to talk about the different parks. But it was specific, but it was within boundaries. I don't know if that answers your question. That we did go a little bit further than not having a list, but I think there's still some ability to make it relevant to today.
Why don't we let him go through all of the questions? I was asking for guidance. Okay. I think let's let him go through and then see where we're at.
Sure.
Most things will probably be covered.
When can associations begin scheduling neighborhood feedback meetings on parks bond improvement? Phil touched on that. We're in this process of identifying this program manager. It's worked exceptionally well with the sewer bond issue that we have right now, where we have Hazen and Sawyer. We have a lady named Brandy Lighton, who's in our Public Works Engineering group. She manages the day-to-day deployment of that particular contract with Hazen and Sawyer, so she's advocating almost as an owner's rep or as a staff member. And we'll do the same thing here, where we have somebody that represents our city interest with some very talented, I can tell you, consulting firms that have responded to the RFP. The 4 or 5 names that are there, I wouldn't have any hesitation with any of them being the ones that we decided to work with. So I really think we have the ability to pick from, good, better, best, and yeah. So I don't think we can make a bad decision there. But I'd say that right now we want to hold off, right, on scheduling those until we get that step out of the way and know who we're working with. Oh, projects be prioritized. Will you consider how long it has been since a neighborhood has received parks improvements in any form? As of now, what parks do you anticipate will receive funding first for improvements? What is the right process for achieving neighborhood-specific needs? Sometimes it appears some neighborhoods are getting more than their fair share. Okay, so that's a mouthful. I think that it's very important that as we start to do work across Fort Lauderdale, that we're mindful of the fact that we have a city that has a northeast to southeast to southwest to the northwest and has a downtown, and we don't want all the work to be done in any one of those places where it's not being done in any one of the other. We've talked all along about the fact that we've had these more iconic projects in each of the districts. We've always talked to that some of the first funding would go towards getting those projects kicked off because they will be the bigger splash. Having said that, we'll sit and direct our project management team to say there's low-hanging fruit out there, and we shouldn't put that aside at the benefit of waiting on Tunnel Top Park to come online, because FDOT still has more study to do. So I truly think it's going to be a balance, and it'll be a balance. It'll be a balance that we'll have to manage citywide so that we are, in fact, not leaving anybody behind and improving across the board. I don't know about parks that haven't had work done in the recent past. I don't know that necessarily catapults anybody to the top of the list, but the intent is really to just get a lot of work done fast. And this money sitting in the bank doesn't do any of us any good, other than it accrues interest. And so we'll be pushing hard to get stuff done. What is the process for determining purchases of land? Okay, so I sort of touched on that one already. Obviously, our first push is to look towards that walkability within 10 minutes, because that's the Commission's policy direction. There's just a natural piece of land out there that you think makes a good park. I've taken cold calls. As a matter of fact, I probably could have spent all $200 million the day after the election to sell our property. I have found, unfortunately, that people have an inflated sense of the value of the property that they want to shed to the city, or that it has some undesirable component to it that can become our problem and not theirs. So we're sort of very sensitive to that. But if you have an idea, if there's a piece of property out there that just makes a natural park, I've never known a parks director not to think every piece of property makes a great park. Nor have I known a fire chief to ever think any property makes a good place for a fire station. We certainly we'll take your feedback. We've got a handful now that are working their way through, and we've got a handful that we've researched and put on hold because we could give an appraisal for $28 a square foot and they wanted 50. And I just can't get there. How much has been spent already? A very small amount, because we haven't issued the bonds yet. We did adopt a reimbursement resolution, so to the extent that we do spend money, we can reimburse ourselves for expenses, so they would be out of the general fund. There is likely the first parcel that we have some agreement on that creates green space in District 1. It will come to the Commission that's been to the Parks and Recreation Beaches Advisory Board. It would be a land acquisition, and I think the range was about $2.4 million. That probably would be the first bit of money that's spent if the Commission decides to buy this parcel as suitable for parkland within 10 minutes of the addresses up there. This money be used for anything other than the purchase of land for parks and improvements to parks. It has to have a direct nexus to parks. It has direct nexus to what was contemplated in the bond resolution. So I can't take this money and go buy or go build a police building with it or a fire station. There are some places with parks, we can look out on the barrier island and make some arguments that there's new parks out there, that the aquatic center might be a park investment, and we can maybe use some of it to enhance public access to public space, but this will really be used for acquisition and parks improvement. So neighborhood entranceway, an area where the money will be spent. How about entrances to the city? I think that's a stretch. Gateways and gateway signs and gateway entryway, I'd have to obviously get with bond council and see if they could draw a direct nexus to parks and public spaces for city entrances to qualify for park bond expenses. We have never considered entryways to neighborhoods to be parks, and I don't know that they necessarily would meet that definition. So probably other pots of money for entryways and not the parks bond. With regards to oversight, will that be a task of the Parks and Rec Board or a new board? It will be the Parks and Rec and Beaches Advisory Board. The Commission has said they think that board is assembled and has the right talent on it to at least start and be that group that will oversee the citizen portion of oversight of how we make recommendations on spending park bond money. Will we outsource the implementation of the bond funds or hire more staff? We intend on outsourcing the implementation. I don't have anything that has taken me from that course yet. I haven't looked at their responses and seen what the prices ranges are, and nothing's made me fall too far out of my chair. If anything changes, we'll let you know. But if we try as a staff, I'll just be real honest, we don't have the bench strength and the expertise to spend that quantity of money that quick. You need a company that can bring hundreds of resources to the table and be designing and planning and bidding and awarding and constructing and oversight. It's not just bringing a program manager on board, even though we refer to it as a program manager. It's a liaison into a much larger designed to be engineering parks consulting firm that can literally bring hundreds of assets to the table, and I just can't do that. You wouldn't want me to do that. That would we all of a sudden would be talking about substantial increase in costs. Customer service will need to be a focus for the Parks Bond Initiative. I think we should just say customer service will need to be a focus, period. And it should be in just about everything we do. Is there a thought or guidance on what customer service process or metrics will look like for Parks Bond projects? I don't know that I necessarily understand that question. Can you give me any better context?
I can. I spoke to somebody on the phone who called, and this individual was concerned that customer service would be lacking with this much going on. But it sounds like you answered it when you said city staff can't do all this.
Right.
So.
Right. Now, we'll still have a call center. We're not going to, get out of the business of doing anything to do this. We'll just enhance our level of service to be able to get this done. Will 80% of the bond money be invested back into the city foundation? What is city foundation?
I know the name of the person who sent that. I think it's Laura Honda. Is she here? I couldn't get a clarification.
If we get a clarification, I'll answer it, but I'm not sure what city foundation means. How much of the bond funds will be used for consulting fees? We don't know that yet because we'll have to negotiate to that. We went to the market. It was an RFQ, correct? RFP. Okay, so RFP is a little bit different than RFQ, so it'll have a funding. We'll start to learn about funding here soon, and obviously a competitive process. There's incentive to be competitive in your pricing as well. Qualifications are important, but pricing will be, in an RFP, pricing will be at least probably 30%, if not more, of the final determination as to who is ultimately selected as the consulting firm.
So,
Did you say 30%?
In an RFP, as far as evaluation
But
criteria.
it's a CCNA process, so they said that I guess there was more negotiating in those type of processes.
Okay.
I'm not that familiar with the CCNA process, but I know they said.
So price will be the component.
There is part of it, the proposal was
Not
price.
30% fees. I hope that's not what you heard.
I
think that's why you reacted strongly. No, it won't be a 30% fee. How much will the bond funds be used for studies? I'm tired of studying stuff. I'm ready to know stuff. Now, when we say the word study, we do need to affirm that when we went to this community and did the Parks Master Plan, that study is still a good study. Because things change, times change, and we want to make sure that the data that we had then is still the good data that we need today. We will need to design what we want to build, and then we will need to build it. So if that's considered a study, that's a process. But I don't intend on all of a sudden getting this money in the bank and then saying we need to do another Parks and Recreation Master Plan and study it for 3 more years just to figure out that, it's aged enough that we need to study it again. So all the while getting the same answers that we got the first time we studied. Feedback on their assessment of the ULI panel findings recommendations. So Chris is going to editorialize just for a second, and I hope you give me the liberty to do that, and then I'll get back in my lane. I was not a fan of what happened with that ULI study when it came to Fort Lauderdale, and I was not a fan of it because it generally advanced the position of the Downtown Development Authority. It came out of somebody else's mouth. And it's always nice when you hire somebody, bring them in, and then the top 3 things that come as a result of the study is things that they don't do, it's things the city does. And so to go hear the report out and say, we did this great study on behalf of the Downtown Development Authority, now you need to go hire a public realm officer, whatever the heck that is. I was like, well, that's great. I wonder who's going to pay for that. That would have been nice to be at the table when you crafted that as an outcome. So I think it was a good exercise. Jenny knows exactly where I stand on it, that I think it advanced some positions that I'm not sure that the city is necessarily in support of as it relates to the downtown and where certain things are built as we move into the future. But, like with any of these, it was folks that came in, they were professional, they were from out of town. They didn't know the day-to-day politics of Fort Lauderdale and didn't know what making the recommendation of tear the jail down really would mean to Broward County. And so,
Good idea.
one of the outcomes was it's the best view in town, so we might as well tear it down and taxpayers there and put the people that are in jail not looking at the river. And so I said, well, that's an interesting idea, but I don't really know how we accomplish that. They advanced a very strong position of the new federal building being south of the river, south of the tunnel, which I know Rio Vista will love.
I'm not saying anything, no, whatever. We'll talk about it when it happens.
Talk about it when it happens. So anyway, that was Chris's, as long as we're
As the EMS station.
as long as that's the EMS station. I'm going to talk about that before I'm done. If you don't give me the hook here, sooner rather than later. I think those ULI studies are good. They're a tool. I don't think that the first thing we do is go hire a public realm officer, create another bond oversight board, which is what the second recommendation was, and then to go out and hire more or less an event programmer for the public spaces in the downtown on a part-time basis. So the first three low-hanging fruit were the DDA's pass over to all of us as taxpayers in Fort Lauderdale to start implementing that plan. So I'll leave it at that. Inclusion of an update on holiday park plans. Does a contract with the Panthers reduce the amount proposed to be needed for updates? It does not. That Panthers project is wholly contained within the War Memorial and the small footprint that's immediately adjacent to it. That's a great project. That's a great project to start to get some Panther involvement in our downtown. The Panthers are about as far west as you can get. Call it East Naples, where they play their games these days. And so it'd be great to get their influence back into the downtown. Very benevolent organization, great ownership, and I really think that that's a good renovation to that facility. It does entail 2 additional ice rinks out back. Some of the landscaping and some of the green roof that they've added to it here recently, and the ability to internally program it when they're not using it. And I got to tell you, they don't use it very often. When they're practicing it, their practices are real early in the morning. So it's a great way, in my opinion, to have an aged facility that needs help come online and not just be lost for public use, but to be partnered with a good organization that they'll bring us a top-notch facility. How much money will be invested in assist trunks or Northwest Park? Same amount of money that will be invested in every other area of the city. Vice Mayor McKenzie has identified Carter Park as a park in his district that he really wants to invest in, and there are plans to bring the community center that's in that park to current. And I've heard him say when he was at a principal education day in the park that this building needs to, this building is dated, it's aged, it needs to go, and we need to build something beautiful and current in its nature. So I can absolutely, with 100% certainty, say that the Sistrunk and Northwest Parks will be just like every other park in the city.
God bless you.
Provide an update on Tunnel Top Park. Yes, we have a tunnel. At some point, somebody decided, we're South Florida, where the water's at 6 feet, let's dig a tunnel. Brilliant person in the city. And so the thought with this is it's already been designed once, but the thought was that we should figure out how to maximize the capacity of the Tunnel Top Park. So the plan that was done had a park of about 70 linear feet. We pitched that back and funded a reevaluation of that park to figure out how long the distance could be on the tunnel top. But if you can picture it as if you're coming north on Federal Highway and you're approaching that tunnel, and you come out the backside, the north side, and you start up towards Broward Boulevard, there is a way that you can create the distance needed for the road in the top of the tunnel to stay at a certain height. If you start to stair step a park back and naturally allow it to rise as it travels north too, then you can end up with a bigger, longer park. And so I've heard preliminary engineering numbers of not quite double in size, but 3/4 again as much in size potentially. So I heard a number even yesterday of instead of 70 feet that we were talking somewhere in the 120-ish feet that you could get to from an engineering perspective. That's so preliminary. Don't. I see Stan writing. He's going to say you said 120. You said 120, and it's only 119 and a half. But that study will be done by FDOT. It's their tunnel. They have to do the study. They'll report back to us how big it can be. And then we'll have to decide if we can, if we like it funded. I don't see why we wouldn't. I mean, as much park as we can get there, the better. Right? Every foot matters. How much of this money will be spent on city-owned seawalls? I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you that the money that's related to the parks bond can only be spent on the seawalls that are there to support to support a park. And we really only have one of those in Fort Lauderdale, and that is the linear park known as Riverwalk. So if there are seawalls that are enhanced, it will be enhanced adjacent to public park like this. We can't go around town and just start raising seawalls and calling them parks. Does it have a seawall? I guess it would. Yeah, Cullyham Park would have. Yeah. So wherever if there's a park adjacent to it, it's in play. If there's no park adjacent to it, it's just a seawall. Yeah, there's that Beck Park over there. Yeah.
Are you counting linear parks as well?
I think we can. We're trying to.
Like 10th Street in Rio Vista, Iowa.
Folks, we're not opening it up for questions. If you want to write down a question, that's great. Sorry.
The trick there is it just has to be adjacent to a park. There has to be a nexus to a park. Otherwise, we can't use, then we need to do a seawall bond or a stormwater bond and try to advance it that way. Will funds from the parks bond be designated regular maintenance or the following at near Fort Lauderdale Beach? Our beach wall, including the LED lighting in the wall. Don't need money for that. We funded that otherwise in the budget, and that is that's now a recurring maintenance cost. We don't need to look to bond funds for it. That's handled. New Oceanfront Plaza. There are some park bond funds that are anticipated for the Oceanfront Plaza, and it just becomes a sort of a funding triangle out there, trying to figure out what are eligible funds for the new parks that are coming online versus the CRA projects versus the aquatic center, and what's eligible for CRA funds, park bond funds, general funds, park impact fees. It just becomes a budgeting exercise to figure out which funds are appropriately used for which of those projects. There's sort of 3 enhancements that are being contemplated to the aquatic center at this point, in addition to the work that was originally proposed out there, and that is the renovation of the locker room, the renovation and creation of an observation type deck so that people can view the aquatic center, and the conversion of the 15-meter diving platform to a 27-meter diving platform. Betty's going to be the first one to jump.
Yeah, right.
I already have her scheduled. And 27 meters. Could you imagine?
No, just
Oh my goodness.
would have been break every bone on my body.
Those projects are. It's happy to show you how all that funding works, but certain components of those projects are eligible for certain types of funding. The restrooms, fountain showers, tables, grills at the south lot. I don't know that I looked at park bond funds for those. That's sort of park maintenance stuff.
Yeah.
And we're invested well enough in our capital plan that I probably don't look to maintain existing stuff out of bond funds. We can just look to the capital plan for.
We just redid all those bathrooms.
Yeah, that restroom down there is pretty nice. The nice art on the side of it.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as public restroom.
It's a public restroom, it's fine.
We have a few more questions.
Did I generate questions?
Yeah, so a lot of questions that the general questions about communication. The communication process, the communication flow, some basic questions. Is there an updated list of park improvements that is available to the general public? So that's one question. It's kind of all related. And how will the city be communicating updates? Because I think that's what we're hearing, is that we just don't know a lot yet, because maybe we don't know a lot yet. But when we get to the point of a project plan,
Yes.
will we see it, the timeline? And this is the overarching big series of questions that I'm going to hand you this stack.
Perfect.
Who prioritizes park improvements? Who decides park improvements? And how do you become part of the Parks Advisory Board if you're interested? So those are the communications questions, and then I'm going to hand you this other list.
Good. Okay. So maybe I'll start in reverse order. So we have all of the time. You hear if you come to any of our meetings or happen to watch us on TV, the first thing we do after the motions is we appoint board and committee members. So we have enough vacancies citywide that we seem to always have a need for participation. Park Recs and Beaches Advisory Board is sort of a coveted one to have, and it's got folks that are on it. The city clerk's office is the one that manages all the committee appointments. And so if you go to our website, you can go to the city clerk button, and there's a way to make application to be included on one of the boards and committees. It becomes part of this big binder that the clerk has in his office. And when the commissioners need somebody to appoint, either by their district or by consensus, they come and find out who's interested. And they literally go through and, it's a nice process because it actually asks for more than just your name and your address. It sort of says, what's your talents? Because if you're an architect, we probably want you in, on a different committee than if you were an attorney or if you were a financial advisor. And so, we all bring something to the table. We all bring a talent to the table. And so that's not to say that, a lawyer doesn't serve well on a Parks, Rec, and Beaches Advisory Board. But we might really need a lawyer on a different board where that skill set is needed. So welcome all that participation. My guess is that the selection of doing the projects that will be prioritized based upon some type of a matrix that our project manager comes up with. We're not creating this thing. We're not doing this the first time. So there's examples out there that will be that's gone before us where people can, or we can put projects into a matrix and say what falls out, what prioritizes higher than others. I'll take that to, we've got 7 adaptation action area neighborhoods that we talk about with stormwater. And even those 7, well, they are prioritized as the first 7, they're even in priority order based upon a certain set of criteria so that we can say that this wasn't just indiscriminately picked and that, somebody was favored over somebody else. So, and I guess at the end of the day, until the 5 people that get to vote say, Chris, we don't want you here anymore. I guess at the end of the day, I can even help make some of those decisions as we start to roll projects out. So.
And the communications.
Yeah, communication is terribly important. We don't probably do enough of it. Even though I've got to tell you, we every day think about over communicating. And one of the biggest challenges I get is that you aren't communicating enough. It is top of mind, and it sometimes seems to be that target that we just don't quite get to. One of the things we will require as a part of bringing this consulting firm on board is that they have a communication and a public communication plan. No different than any road project that gets done or any other major scale project. It'll come with a PR firm, and they'll be charged with communicating and getting people out. And then obviously we have our strategic communications group. I don't know how, on a scale of this, that their depth is that deep, but we, believe me, I understand the need to communicate. I wish I could just read minds and communicate before you had to ask the question. And I can't, but communication is key. So.
Look at that. So there's the stack, and then there's 3 on top.
Man,
You get to stop at.
The first one is the cost of the Holiday Park garage. Any sense of that?
$25,000 per parking space. So I don't know that, but that's the general rule of thumb. 25 you can build a surface lot. Rule of thumb: $3,000 a space. Parking deck, structured parking by the time you put in ramps and all, it builds right about 25,000 space. So if you can put that, and that has held true to recent parking decks that have been built. A little secret, which isn't much of a secret because I'm truly exploring it, is that I'm looking at the idea of moving us out of this particular building, the City Hall staff that's here now, into some other downtown space so that we could build the police building on this parcel, partly because this is attached to a parking deck and at $25,000 a space. We build one less parking deck. And anytime you can build one less structured parking deck, you save yourself a tremendous amount of project cost. And it's a lot easier to build something on a site that's vacant versus one that's encumbered with buildings and towers and cars and fuel tanks. And it's a way that we might really get some work done fast. So parking decks mean just that much to a project, but $25,000 a space. Where can we see the list of properties already in process? Really not any place to see that. I guess you could email me, and I guess I probably couldn't say I don't want to share it with you. But I'll tell you, our ability to negotiate a good land deal, this was so foreign to me, because our ability to negotiate a good land deal is so that the person that we're buying from doesn't know that it's the city coming. And so you all probably know I came from the state of Georgia before coming to Florida, and there were 3 things I could talk to my commission about in private, and one was land acquisition, and that was so that we didn't end up being a bad buyer, because when you come and say, hey, I'm with Fort Lauderdale, we just passed $200 million bond issue for parkland, do you have any interest in selling your property? Well, I mean, how are you going to answer that question? Of course you have interest in selling your property. And so, you know, it would be one of those things that if you truly want to see that list, you know, maybe we pop down to my office and I show it to you, and you know, we don't necessarily lose our negotiating position, but at the end of the day, it's Florida and it's the sunshine, and it is what it is. So, will the small parks be worked on simultaneously as the bigger, longer projects? I think the answer to that is yes. We're going to need some quick wins, and you get quick wins when you do small projects because you can get in there and get a ribbon cut quick. And so, commissioners like to cut ribbons. They do. They can oppose projects from time to time, but then they're there when they cut the ribbon. Did I say that now? Sorry. Yes, we'll need some quick wins, and quick wins come with, you know, getting in and making some improvements in the parks that really matter to the communities, and that's the smaller ones. What is the date of the meeting at Stranahan House for Parkland?
November 25th.
November 25th.
The time.
Total Top Park.
Total Top.
Oh, Total Top Park.
Yeah, you said it. I just cut
It was 11:25 at 5:30 p.m.
5:30.
at the Stranahan House.
How did you decide how much money would go to land acquisition? It was sort of an iterative process as we started through with the commission. You know, the first thought was that if we really want to put a plan together, 150 million was the right number. If you remember, the Downtown Coalition formed. It was a citizen group that sort of advocated on behalf of the bonds. We can't do that. We can only educate. I'll leave it at that.
And on that, how much money is going to land, like the 30 million is what I heard. How did you come up with that?
You know, we had the project list. It had estimated costs of what was there, and we had seawall and riverwalk cost estimate, and then we had what was the delta between that number and either 150 or 200, and the commission said 200 was the better number. And so when the commission said 200 was the better number, we said, how about what's the balance of what's left, which was about $60 million. We said, how about if we put half of it towards land acquisition and half of it towards future projects not yet known. And so that was sort of how that shook out.
Can that go up?
It could. It would mean that something else would have to not be funded, but yes. Is there consideration of the ULI recommendation of...
Stan wrote that.
I'm to the point now where I can't read close with glasses. I can't see anybody in the distance without them. They gave me a prescription for progressive lens, and everybody told me I hate them, so I didn't go get them.
No, you'll like them.
I like them.
The water reserves and using the parks for the duality of the water issues and capture, etc., like Heisinger and others.
ULI park duality for stormwater retention and environmental considerations, coordination between the issues. I don't see why not. I mean, if we're improving parks and have the ability to deal with water better as a part of that construction, which we should.
Sure, of course.
Well, it's monstrous to downtown right now, obviously. As I swim back to my condo tonight.
I've got a kayak downstairs.
Thank you.
I can,
Okay.
I didn't get to, so she wants me to keep rolling. She's tired of my commentary. Address the canopy goals within the park improvements in new parks. So it's South Florida, it's hot. We have sun, I think this is in the sense of sun canopy, shade canopies. That's just an auto build into our parks, right? Because we're, is it trees? I mean, we are tree canopy. So that too, equally important. We've actually increased the tree canopy over the last several years. It's gotten more dense in Fort Lauderdale rather than thinner. But it's hot, trees matter, shade matters, and so those landscape plans. This community is very vocal in wanting sophisticated landscape plans when we do these park improvements. So I anticipate that would be Michael's.
That's not my question, no, but I'm just, no. That's not my question.
Go.
Keep on going.
Okay. Is the city taking into consideration neighborhood densities regarding population as a key determining factor with respect to what neighborhoods need parks? So I'm not the parks guy, the brilliant parks guy standing right next to me, but there is a formula that I'm aware of in the Parks and Rec world that talks about certain certain level of availability based upon population, and so we do to some degree consider that
We do, and we also look at the future growth as well.
as making determinations on parks. So the answer to that is yes. Was any bond money used for the new park at Las Olas and A1A? Is interest on the bond accumulated or not until the money is actually used? So the debt hasn't been issued yet, so there's no interest earned on the debt until the debt's issued. I intend on having this a January 2020 series for the first tranche. We have Moody's and Standard & Poor's coming to visit us on December the 6th, and we are going to somehow, we'll wrap it out of our hat, somehow we're going to get a AAA bond rating, which the city hasn't had in a while. I think we're positioned that we can at least argue hard for it. And if we're able to do that, then we will go to the bond market. I was hoping to go in December, but it's now that we'll go in January. I don't think there's really any big deal between the 2 months with what the bond market is doing right now. So no interest earning yet. That's the good news. We've adopted the reimbursement resolution, so anything we spend, we can reimburse ourselves for. There has been no bond money used in the new park on Las Olas and A1A because we don't have any park bond money yet.
Or does that mean it's deferred, or does that mean the expense is deferred, or does that mean it's not applied to that?
project?
It means that there's an assortment of different funding sources right now in that park. So there's CRA, there's some park impact fees. Depending on where this commission, from a policy perspective, wants to go with the aquatic center, may have to use some park bond fees in that park to be able to transition out some park impact fees or some CRA dollars to use at the aquatic center.
But otherwise, all debt's covered.
Other than that, that's how we just figure out the finances. Now, what is the status of the one-stop shop parcel? Will it become a park? So,
Hear this.
yeah.
Welcome back, Nick.
So, you don't want, the last question I get, you don't want me to say, I don't know. But there's a couple of different things that could happen at One Stop Shop, and it's right to be just absolutely transparent with the group. The commission at this point wanted the building gone, wanted it sodded and irrigated. We've done that. They're in the process of doing that. The building's gone in the process of sodding and irrigation. We've been approached by the GSA, as that parcel potentially being in play for the new federal building that's coming to Fort Lauderdale. Although I think I figured out why we don't get anything done in Washington if they move at the speed of the GSA. And they told us just last month that in 60 days they would shortlist the properties that they had under consideration in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know that that makes a good site for the new federal building or not. I mean, I can get on both sides of the fence and say it's close to Brightline, which would connect the three, the three federal buildings in South Florida, sort of connect this judicial circuit. Then I can argue strongly that it makes a really good green space. I could even argue that there, maybe some type of a development option on it that, retains a lot of its green space, but allows for other type entertainment uses. So just stand by with that one. There's no certain answer at this point. I can tell you that there's no front-running train. That all of a sudden it left the station and that's where we're headed. We need to get this answer out of the GSA or just move along, and then we'll know where we're going with that one. Does the city have money to maintain the new parcels and improve parks once the work has been done? Yeah, ongoing maintenance, that's great, that's a great question, and we will have to in future years fund that. We are a great example of and I'll use Las Olas Boulevard in our pilot walkability, bikeability project out there. We're great at putting something on the ground and making it look cool, and then, realizing you probably are sitting in a building where over the past 50 years this building wasn't maintained at the rate it should have been, and you end up in a building or a park or any other asset that doesn't stay maintained. So yeah, there's a need. It's something we can't just use these one-time costs to build stuff and then hope it maintains itself. And so life cycle costs of facilities are something that's very important for us to look at, and at the end of this we will do some type of like we've done for our facilities, a facilities assessment that gives us a number to program on an annual basis to maintain what we've built. So some of these parks will require additional staff members to run. I mean, you can't build community centers, and that was a part of an geographic area where one of the counties just north of me built a bunch of community centers because they had a parks bond and they never opened them. And they never opened them because they couldn't open them. And so we don't want to be caught in that situation, and we won't be caught in that situation. So we recognize that there's more than just the building cost. There's the keep it open and maintain the cost. So.
Okay. So deeply appreciate you all coming, answering the questions.
Clearly more to be revealed, but I'll come back next month or the month after that if you want.
You said you were going to add something about an EMS substation. Can you do that in 30 seconds or less?
I can. Sort of. So, I'll do anything in 30 seconds or less. Haven't you figured that out?
Get to the point.
Promised to remember. Yeah, so there's a couple parcels we've been looking at south of the river. I think we have them both, at least where we have an agreed upon LOI, letter of interest. And I'm waiting on both of them at this point before I take it to the commission. I will tell you that they are very different in their in what they are. One is much better located, much higher cost. The other one is not as well located, but a lot cheaper cost. I will tell you, and I've told the district commissioner, that I think there's a business case to be made for the parcel that is the better one location-wise. When I look at what I think we can buy it for versus other closed properties in the downtown area on a price per square footage basis, I think it's the better business deal. And if I am successful in convincing the commission that it's the better business deal, I think we can get comfortable landing the parcel that we want, even though it costs more.
Thank you.
Okay.
30 seconds.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. We've got two things we want to cover in a little bit more detail. We're skipping president's report, we're skipping membership report, jumping right to the bylaws committee updates that were noticed back in August. Just making sure the general membership has reviewed them. And Christina is going to call for a vote so we can put the new bylaws as our official new bylaws.
Okay, so in August, I posted the proposed changes online. I gave you online a summary of what those all are. I asked for feedback or questions from everybody, and I got none. Does anybody have any questions before we try to get a vote on this?
Scintillating bylaws.
Anything? No. Okay, so can I get a motion to approve the proposed bylaws?
So moved.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. All right, thank you all. And I'm not aware of any new business. We're going to now go over feedback on the comp plan, which is going to be presented to the P&Z, and Marilyn is a significant author of our comments.
Well, it's a board, it was a board. The board, yes, but it's under information. At our last board meeting, the board of directors went over yet again the observations on the comprehensive plan that we've been working on for a couple of months. And they actually are on the table, and I passed out a few, and they were posted along with the agenda on the webpage when you got the agenda. It really boils down to one page. Hard to believe. All that work and all that document gets boiled down to one page. And essentially, what it is it's a comprehensive plan. It's a regulatory obligation that we have to do. It's a competent document, but it's disappointing. It's disappointing, and I think that I could just read the disappointing paragraph first. Okay? Generally, the proposed comprehensive plan aligns with the 2035 Fast Forward Vision Plan that was adopted in 2013. It supports a continuation of the goals described in the 2013 plan, including a downtown master plan, which has an even longer legacy. So the downtown plan was done in 2008, and we're still working on the downtown plan. Much of the current plan is about adopting and implementing the goals and objectives of superior jurisdictions, describing the needed coordination with county and state agencies, because a lot of what we do in comprehensive planning, we have to abide by the other jurisdictions like the county and the state. We have to implement their plans as well. But predominantly, the proposed plan is about continuing current programs already in place. So while the proposed comprehensive plan is well organized and easier to read than the 2008 comprehensive plan, the essential disappointment is that it lacks vision and forethought, and there are no innovative strategies or approaches to planning a better city. It meets the basic requirement that it is a comprehensive plan, it has been broadly shared, but it answers none of the important questions that are vital to a visionary urban planning. It lacks specifics that would otherwise inspire civic pride and ensure that the city of Fort Lauderdale is an equitable, healthy, progressive, and socioeconomically vibrant city moving forward. So, given that, nonetheless, there are a number of things that we would like to bring to the attention of the Planning and Zoning Board, and we want them to consider and strengthen. And they are distilled down to their essence in these observations. And we're asking that the members of the Planning and Zoning Board focus on these specific observations, as we call them, and strengthen or question the related policies. So number one is the aspirational nature of the affordable housing objectives and the timid milestones proposed. In the housing section, in the housing element, they start out by saying, we aspire to do the following, as opposed to we are going to do the following. So they are aspiring to provide affordable housing for all income levels. Well, we all aspire to do things, right? That's, to me, that's very timid, and it's not something that you can really grab onto, and we're asking the Planning and Zoning Board to look at that and see if they want to go with aspirational goals or they want to set a goal. By such and such date, we hope to have, or we will implement programs to provide affordable housing. We want them to take a look at that and see if they can strengthen that a little bit. Number two is they accepting a level of service for roads at D and E, especially on local roads. Now, that's traffic, okay? If you read the traffic and transportation element, they are giving up and they're saying, okay, well, we'll just accept a level of service D and E on roads, including local roads, which means our local neighborhood roads, okay? You don't want to live on a service level D road, on a 2-lane road in your neighborhood. That's not good. That's like 20,000 cars a day going down those roads. So actually, Planning and Zoning has picked up on this already. I've listened to a couple of their workshops, and they are seriously concerned about that as being not an acceptable level of service on the local roads. So we asked them to take another look at that. Number three, there's a lack of commitment to maintain even the existing level of service for parks. We had a wonderful discussion about parks, okay? Level of service on parks means that there's so many acres of parks per so many thousands of people. And that's the typical way the comprehensive plans are evaluated. We have a current level of service on our parks of about 5 acres of parks for 1,000 people, okay? There's a lot of controversy about what you consider a park. Is a school playground a park? Are the entryways to our neighborhoods, you know, our little entryways where we have the Imperial Park entryway. Yeah. They consider that a park.
That's a park, yeah.
It was interesting when Chris said we don't consider entryways parks. And I'm saying to myself, wait a minute.
If you want to do something,
in the inventory,
it's a park.
Right. In the inventory, it's a park. Oh, all right. Reasonable people can disagree about what goes into the inventory. But there's no commitment in the plan to maintain that level of service, okay? They will allow the level of service to slip even as low as 4 or 3.5 acres per 100,000 persons. We do not accept that. We think that the Planning and Zoning Board and the Commission should make a firm commitment, especially given that we just gave them $250 million, that they will at least not allow the level of service of the parks to decline beyond below what it is today. We're asking P&Z to take a look at that. Number 4, there is a timid increase in the tree canopy, but there is no plan to increase or protect it, okay? And that's in the conservation element. Yes, they say we should have more trees. Yes, we should have more trees, but there's no definitive statement about how many more trees and how many trees are we going to plant a year and how are we going to accomplish this and where's the money going to come from. So again, it's not specific enough. So we're asking the Planning and Zoning Board to recommend that they add more specificity to how are we going to go about increasing the tree canopy. There is no firm commitment to adopt green building requirements into the zoning. And that would have been a no-brainer.
I thought that would have been.
That would have been a no-brainer. Let's just say within 2 years, we will adopt green building principles within the city zoning. Why not? We're asking them, why not? And there is, number 6, there is more talk and no action about transfer of development rights and inclusionary zoning. I mean, you go back to the 2008 plan, it said we should explore inclusionary zoning and transfer of development rights. The same language is in this plan 8 years later, 10 years later, all right? If you're not going to do it, don't do it. Don't just keep saying we should explore. It's a waste of your time and our intelligence. And number 7, there is no acknowledgement that the future land use plan, which is the same as the old land use plan, no change whatsoever. There is no acknowledgement that the future land use plan as implemented by the current zoning will result in development impacts that are aligned with the infrastructure service improvements needed on a timely basis, such as EMS, which was one of the very local hot issues that exemplifies the problem, okay? Yes, they say we will have, in the capital improvement element, they say we will have all of the infrastructure needed to accommodate all of the development in the future land use plan. But we all know that's crazy. So because they haven't done it in the past, and they're not going to be able to do it in the future. So at least there should be an acknowledgement in the plan that there may be situations or time periods when we have a mismatch between infrastructure and development, and then we have to deal with that, okay? There should be some more realistic observations or more realistic discussion about the give and take between when development comes online and when infrastructure comes online. So those are the 7 issues that we're asking the Planning and Zoning Board to review and strengthen in the comprehensive plan. And if we adopt this tonight, we will go to and we hope everybody else will go to the November 20th meeting on the public hearing on the comprehensive plan. And we will make this presentation to the Planning and Zoning Board, and hopefully they will take some of our suggestions and make some of these changes and strengthening to the plan and forward it on to the City Commission, and then we will all have an opportunity to go to City Commission and do it all over again. So that's the results of our work, and we're presenting it to you tonight for a vote on whether or not we should adopt this and bring it to the city's Planning and Zoning Board on November 20th. Any questions?
Questions, discussion?
Yeah. Kudos, I mean, terrific as far as our goals of getting to life standards and metric goals, which is essential. 2 organizations today are out about property rights and their concerns about codification and wanting to challenge it. Feedback has been regular that the most missing element within the comprehensive plan is the fiduciary responsibility of the city towards public health, safety, and welfare over other issues. And we are one of the few cities that does not have that language within the code. And we ought to have the protection of the resident livability within it, if that could be inclusive.
Well, that was the reason why we put in the number 7, was the acknowledgement that that development sometimes races ahead of our ability to provide the infrastructure. We didn't specifically deal with life safety, public health, because, well, we could have, but then we would have also had to include water and sewer, traffic. I mean, I think that the statement is 7 is general enough.
Fiduciary responsibility, just inclusiveness of that within the sentence would compensate for it, but there is a need within city comprehensive plans, especially in a property rights state, to affect the prioritization of fiduciary responsibility of the city towards it.
Well, if you don't think that number 7 is strong enough, and would be stronger if we said something about, or would you like to propose some other language? We could make number 8. We could put in a number 8.
Yeah.
Add 8? You think adding is better?
Then you need to propose the specific language so I can get it in, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Go for it.
The city, let me just look at how this is done, I'm sorry.
The city should acknowledge its fiduciary relationship to provide.
It's her fiduciary responsibility to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the community as their main fiduciary responsibility.
I could go with that, that's fine.
How about as a main priority, because you put
As
fiduciary?
their main.
As their main
responsibility.
priority.
Not, so that has to be above development.
That makes
and
No, I
other-
understand, I just mean instead of using fiduciary duty twice.
I'm fine. I'm fine with that.
She's good with that.
All right, I'm gonna read it back.
Thank you.
The city should acknowledge the fiduciary duty to protect the welfare and safety of the community as their main priority.
The health, safety, and welfare.
The city should acknowledge their fiduciary duty to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the community as their main priority.
Right, that's fine.
Okay.
Ann had a question?
On number 4, the tree canopy,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about this in Lauderdale tomorrow too, I think a lot of these things, for instance, this one, there's the current fines were established in 1986. I think there should be a recommendation to update the fines, and with many of these issues, that the city followed through on enforcement of these
Big
things.
time. Okay, I know where you're coming from on this. The comprehensive plan is not the vehicle to implement the plan, the thing.
Okay.
That is why we're doing a redo of the landscape regulations, because all of those things are in there. What this should say, there should be a firmer commitment to an increase in the tree canopy and increasing to protect it, which leads you to do a zoning change. All right? So that's in there, but it's like it's pushing them to do that and gives them support to do that.
Great question. Any other input or questions? All right, ready to make a motion?
Okay, I make a motion to approve the draft correspondence as amended to include Stan Eichelbaum's number 8 language, which I already read in.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, okay, November 20th, Planning and Zoning Board.
It's at 6 o'clock
It's 6 o'clock.
here.
And commendation for the work done.
Thank you, Marilyn, for this wonderful job.
Thank you.
There you go. All right, we're going to close out a couple other things. You've got the flyer about the turkey giveaway on November 23rd. Don't forget to go help. This is not to get a turkey, it's to give one, or to be one. Who made the food tonight?
Barbara.
Fantastic. The food was wonderful. Thank you, Barbara. It was wonderful. The council voted to have commissioners come to council meetings on a regular basis, so we have a few commissioners already confirmed. So all of them. All right, so December is Commissioner Sorensen, January is Commissioner Glassman, February is Vice Mayor McKinsey, March is question mark for the mayor.
He is, yeah.
He's confirmed then, and April is Commissioner Moreta. So as these commissioners are coming to our meeting, if you have specific questions for that commissioner of that district, please feel free to send them through the council website with the subject header Commissioner X, Mayor X questions, so that we have them in advance of the meeting. So again, Commissioner Sorensen is coming in December. Ann, did you have a question?
No, not a question, I just had one more piece of information for everyone. There's a reporter on Channel 10 News who is doing, is really looking at the water issues in Fort Lauderdale and in other southern Florida cities. And there will be a special on Channel 10 tonight at 11 o'clock.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful.
Can I add one thing to that? And this is under the, I guess, new business. At the infrastructure task force meeting, at the last one, a week ago, the mayor came. And he asked the infrastructure task force to look into and make a recommendation on whether or not we should do a P3, which is one of those planning partnerships to build a new water plant, which we did do. And we researched it, we had presentations about P3s, and so let me just explain that a little bit. P3s are public-private partnerships. In other words, you partner with a private entity to build a public facility, which would be, in this case, the water plant. You all know we have to build a new water plant, okay? But we were very sympathetic to the possibility of using that as a mechanism, but we think we're a little too soon on that. We're sort of like putting the horse before the cart, because the city has commissioned a very big study on whether or not we are going to replace or repair the existing water plant, okay? That study is coming to the commission in December. We'll get the date and we'll send it around so people can at least listen to it on television, because it's going to be a very, very important decision about whether or not we repair and renovate the existing 5-ash plant, or we build a whole new plant out by the well fields. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, okay? It's a big decision, and it's going to be like the next big bond is going to be for the water. So we should just keep that in mind, and as things are percolating, go look at that program on water, because water is the new gold. Water is the new gold. We're actually going to be buying 6.5 million gallons per day from the C-51 canal as an addition to our water supply, because we need more water. Yes.
Was desalinization plant considered?
That was part of the consultant study, and they conclude, I believe, from what I've heard of it, that they have concluded it's just not worth it. The amount of money you have to spend, the amount of energy you use, and the amount of waste byproduct that you have to get rid of, it's that as long as we have water, and we do, we have aquifer water, and now we have the $6.5 million from the canal reservoir, we have enough water in terms of enough water. It's the question of we got to get it, and we got to clean it, and we got to distribute it. But to go into desalinization would cost so much more money than just using the resource we have and cleaning it and getting it to us.
Even with projected population?
Even with projected population. Desalinization is very expensive. You only go there when you're desperate. Tampa just went there and they were desperate.
It was discussed and passed on long ago. All right, so I'm going to close down the meeting. Wish everybody a safe and healthy and happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you at the holiday party on the 10th in December. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. Marilyn? Yes. Colleen is involved.